Hello, beautiful alchemist. Happy Friday. Happy summer solstice. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and I am very excited to be here with you today. I have a couple of things to let you know. If you would like to join me later today for a summer solstice event where you will be guided through an alchemical journey, be sure that you are registered for my newsletter. Sign up for my newsletter so that you can receive access to the free event today for the summer solstice. That aside, my loves, we also have Gwen Allison back with us for the third conversation. I just want to thank Gwen, first of all, for spending an entire week with us here on Reiki Radio. And I am very excited to announce that Gwen, her new podcast is premiering on Awakening Airwaves today. So if you haven't already, be sure to look up Awakening Airwaves wherever you're listening to this podcast, Reiki Radio. So you can listen on your favorite podcast platform. You can watch the podcast on the Awakening Airwaves YouTube channel. Please follow us, subscribe, leave a review. It's just, we are trying our best to share more with the community and hopefully support you all even more on your path. So, Gwen's episode or show will be premiering today. Now, with Gwen and I here on Reiki Radio, the conversation that we had today was all about spirituality and relationships, which really is a feature of her new podcast. But I was very excited to have this conversation because when I first started my practice, I was in a relationship at the time. And because so much was changing for me and I was getting very introspective and just so much that was shifting, I felt like I needed to hermit a bit. And so I went a little bit in isolation, and it definitely had an effect on the relationship that I was in at the time. But since then, I have learned a lot about many people having experiences of kind of dancing around with feeling different within their relationships because they are changing when they start doing this work. So, Gwen and I talk a lot about these kinds of experiences, how to work through them, what it is that we have found, what we have learned, and hopefully it will support you. And if anything in this episode resonates with you, be sure to reach out to Gwen. Let her know your thoughts, what came up for you. Yeah. And then go over to Awakening Airwaves and listen to her premiere episode over there, where she will be talking about finding yourself during your single season, which is also an incredible topic. So, all of that aside, if you would like to work with Gwen, be sure to go to her website, myspiritualbutterfly.com. You can also follow her on Instagram at myspiritualbutterfly. And if you want to know more about her as well as other Reiki teachers and practitioners, go to the new website, thereikiclass.com. There are free resources there for you. There's an incredible blog. There are ways to work with and connect with, again, teachers and practitioners. So hopefully that serves you and your journey. So let's get into this conversation about spirituality and relationships, and I will see you on the other side. We are back, our third hour with the beautiful Gwen Allison of My Spiritual Butterfly, who has now become my sister friend. Um, I am so thankful that you agreed to have this extended conversation with us today, my love.
Oh, I'm so grateful you invited me. It's just been so wonderful to have these conversations with you. Just
Yeah.
fluid and easy. It's just like when we chat normally. It's
Yes.
wonderful.
No,
So
it really
yeah, thank
is.
you. But thank
No,
you for giving me this space to share.
yeah, no, thank you. And the thing about these kind of platforms, why it excites me so much is because we learn so much from each other, and you
Mm,
can never even predict what it is that you're going to say. That's the thing that really helps someone today. So,
mm,
speaking of helping people today, something we are all familiar with are relationships, and, really in every capacity. I mean, our lives are based on these connections and interactions, but you are highlighting, even in your new podcast on Awakening Airwaves, that spiritual lens that comes in relationship to us navigating relationships. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I want to start out by asking you, I think most of us can probably relate to this. Have you noticed a difference in maybe like what your expectations were, your stance, how you showed up in relationship versus once you started your practices, whether Reiki, meditation, whatever it's been, has that started to change what it is that you want to experience or how you experience relationship?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Gosh, uh, I was married before for 13 years, together for 15, and then divorced after that. And if I think back to that relationship, which was my first really long, big relationship, from like, I think I was like 23 to almost 40 in that relationship. Yeah, I was very much, I had no relationship role models to kind of go by. So I was
Yeah.
just, this is back in the day now, so a long time ago. So I wasn't aware of emotional regulation. I was very much coming from my family and a father who was very violent, basically, and always arguing with my mom, and so I was very much on the defense when it came to relationships. I was always defending and always um, wanting to stick up for myself, but in this kind of aggressive way. I kind
Yeah.
of took on that masculine aggression in a way. And, very much kind of, don't you dare talk to me like that type. It was from that standing up for my mom, for me, that all of that energy came into my marriage.
Yeah.
So yeah, my husband, yeah, had a lot to kind of deal with, I think, with that. So there was lots of arguments. I didn't know how else to deal with conflict because that's
Hmm.
what I grew up with. So we would argue if we weren't happy with something, and I would not tolerate anything. And also, I think as in terms of our as a Black woman as well, and our ancestry and things like that, we very much are taught to be strong
Yeah.
and not take this and not take that and not tolerate all these things, and that's seen as a sign of weakness. So I didn't have much softness, I would say, in my relationship. It could
Yeah.
be a little bit, but I was very much in my masculine energy, and wounded masculine at that, so very argumentative and on the lookout for danger, on the lookout for problems,
Yeah.
all of that in the relationship. I could still be tender, and compassionate and kind and loving. So I'm not saying I was a tyrant or a monster,
Right.
but I just didn't know how to deal with conflict then. I wasn't taught, I didn't know, and many of us still don't know even
Right.
now. Um, so that's kind of how I dealt with relationships. There wasn't too much emotional intimacy, obviously physical, but in terms of sharing how we felt about things and having those types of conversations. So, yeah, but I felt I was being myself and I was being the self that I knew,
Right.
which was that. So
Yeah.
I wasn't pretending to be anybody else. I felt relaxed. I could be me in my relationship. I was also, I would say, the breadwinner of the relationship, which also put me more in my masculine
Hmm.
in my last marriage. But yeah, completely different to who I'm being now, I think. But yeah,
Well, before we
to
get
answer your
into who you're
question.
being now, honey, you just
Mm.
dropped so many things. I'm like, ooh, ah, ooh. I'm
Oh
just
yeah, go ahead.
scribbling
Yeah,
notes.
sorry.
One of the things that really stood out with what you said, I think a lot of people have challenge with, um, even when we get into this work, I think one of the big, big obstacles is starting to have that self responsibility. So
Mm,
even hearing you say, this is who I was, and you're not trying to defend it, you're not giving,
mhm,
you know what I mean? Like you understand the roots and you
mhm,
understand where it came from, but there's no defensiveness around this is who I was. There's this
mhm,
understanding of I get why I was this way, but this is the truth of how my contribution also played a part
mhm.
in what happened. And I
Yeah.
think that can be really hard for a lot of people to admit
Mm,
the role that we play and how
mhm,
we've contributed. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that first. was this hindsight that you looked back and then you realized, wow, look at how I was identifying, how I was being. And
Mm,
what was that like to have that realization? Was it a hard pill to swallow? Did you have immediate
mm.
compassion for yourself? Like, what did it bring up?
Yeah, I think I didn't realize it until we were going through the divorce.
Mm,
And I share a lot that that's when I was going through my, not spiritual awakening, but I was discovering tools like the law of attraction and things like that and the secret. So that makes you very responsible for your thoughts and who you're being. And when I looked back at who I was being, not just in the marriage, but also when we were going through the divorce and separation and all of that, I was being very blameful. I was, wasn't taking accountability for any of it,
yeah.
and was just blaming and justifying my decision. And so being able to then at that point reflect and understand that there's another way. Because on the one hand, I was trying to focus on my future and write down the things I wanted for myself after the relationship. But then, we were having arguments and things like that in the meantime. So there was this disconnect in terms of who I was trying to be
Mm,
and who, I was actually being in real life. So that was powerfully shown to me.
yeah.
But what I could see was the pain that I put my ex-husband through. I was able to clearly see that in a way I hadn't been able to see before. I was able to see from his perspective for once and understand that my decision has caused a lot of pain to him and our family and potentially our daughter as well as me.
Mhm.
Although I still stuck by that decision, that made me look at things differently and just tone it down a little bit and be more compassionate.
Yeah.
And the response comes back. I can see how powerfully women can lead in a relationship on the spiritual side of things
Yeah.
and in terms of energy. And when we kind of shift a certain way, we find that our partner kind of shifts with us a little bit. So yeah, that's what I found. But yeah, it wasn't until the very end of the relationship that I took full accountability for my part in it. And understanding it, in our scenario anyway, isn't always the case, but in our
Yeah.
scenario, it took two to cause that demise of the relationship, break up with the family.
Well, it's interesting you say in that situation I took too. So I'll admit as well, since you're being so vulnerable, I was
Yeah.
also married when I was 22. And honest to goodness, I can't tell you anything bad about the person I married.
Mm.
Nothing, nothing, not one
Okay,
thing.
great.
Honest to goodness, yeah.
Mm,
But I was a nightmare. I mean, in part, the same,
mm,
hyper, in a masculine energy a lot because of how I was raised, very defensive, very like, you're not going to tell me what to do type of thing.
mm.
And not that they were even trying to tell me what to do.
No.
I had that type of defensiveness. And there's a laundry list of how I mean, I was out of pocket in a lot of ways. And I really wanted out. And it wasn't until I was out of that situation and looking back. And again, instead of defending how I was being, I had a totally different lens of understanding. I saw like my wounding and why, and the projections and the truth of why I was being that way, and all of these things. And to
Mm,
this day, okay, I was divorced by the time I was 23. I'm 48.
mm,
To this day,
mm,
if he crosses my mind, I still have this prayer of like, "God, I hope he has the best partner, the best love, the best," because
mm,
yeah, like I've only always wished the best for him because I mean, he was an incredible person, but it was
mm,
me. And I mean,
yeah.
that was a hard pill to swallow of like, God
Mm,
dang, girl, who were you being? You know what I mean? But it's just
yeah.
where I was at that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for
it,
sharing that, Yolanda. And you
yeah,
don't
but,
look your age.
thank you, darling.
Can I just mention something on that
Yeah.
though? Speak on that
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. So that reminds me of and I don't know if this resonated with you, but I think when we're growing up, because we don't have these relationship role models and
Mm-hmm.
who we're choosing, a lot of the time we're choosing from our teenage self.
Yeah.
And we want the good looking guy. In the States, you call it
Yes.
the jock, the sports guy, the beefy guy, and just to be like this medallion on his arm type thing. And then when we come across the nice guy, we find them boring.
Yeah.
You would probably kill to be in a relationship with that guy now,
Oh
the
gosh,
nice
yeah.
guy. I'm not saying you would,
Yeah, yeah,
you always shoot
yeah.
for, but but at the time, we want the excitement, we want the kudos of getting the good-looking guy, and that validates us.
But
And the
Gwen,
nice guy, we find them boring
you're sticking
at
it
that
to me
age.
because let me tell you what. He was, had like the edge. He was the good guy
Mm,
to me.
mhm,
Cute doesn't even, that's an understatement. Okay. The
okay.
whole it checked every box you could imagine. I mean, to where my friends,
Mhm,
my everyone in my life was like, "Are you
mm,
crazy?" And it
mm,
really was. It was just me. But
mm.
we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole today. But this also brings up something else that you mentioned. Definitely the role models, but you also
Mm,
mentioned not having emotional regulation, and then
mm,
also the need for emotional intimacy.
mhm,
And I think that is an interesting thing too, like for all of us when we zoom out and see what were the qualifiers for
mm,
us at one stage of life, what were we looking
mm,
for, and how that
mm,
may change over time. Because even people who are in long-term relationships, why or what brought them in initially may not really serve them later. And then I think people have a bit of a conflict of you know, being upset when maybe the person is being who they always were, but now just
mhm.
something in you is changing. So could you talk a little bit about even recognizing in yourself this need to connect on an emotional level? And was it with you first, or did you meet people that helped kind of mirror for you how to be more, have more depth with your emotion?
Yeah, I think that kind of came when I started, again, like I said, the law of attraction.
Hmm.
But the law of attraction wasn't so much about regulation. It felt initially, I think they're changing. The way Esther Hicks talks about it now is different. But initially, it was very much about positive thinking. You're thinking a negative thought, go straight to the opposite. And it was that bit in between that was kind of missing even then.
Mm,
But once I started my spiritual journey in earnest in 2015, when I discovered Reiki and a few other modalities, that's when I started to learn more and understand more about emotional regulation. Whereas before it was, I'm angry, I'm sad,
yeah.
everything was just whatever it was that needed to come
Yeah.
out would come out. But I obviously had a lot of suppressed anger from my upbringing, from my childhood as well, that was coming out in those moments in the arguments and things like that. And so, yeah, just it at the time going through it, I didn't know that's what I needed,
Right.
really. I didn't have access to any of that information. I know it was probably there because you're talking about the early 90s then, around that time. And so I didn't have access to any of that and know that that was possible, or we could like feel anger but be different about it.
Yeah.
I wasn't really, I toyed with meditation a little bit, but that was just more just to, I don't know, calm the mind. And I never used to meditate very regularly. So it wasn't until the 2015 Reiki daily meditation and even things like the principles that I started looking at who I was being in
Yes.
general. Um, yeah, so it wasn't even there for me to look at. It
Yeah.
wasn't in my sphere. It wasn't on my frequency when I
Right.
was in my marriage and before that time. Apart from the only place where I feel there was any emotional regulation was actually in work,
Mm.
because you were forced to be polite and be kind and find a nice way to say things. And so that was probably the initial training ground around it all.
Yeah.
But before that, there wasn't really any where I kind of learned that. I was always interested in psychology and, like yourself, astrology and things like that. And astrology, I know differently now, but I kind of felt that, okay, this is me and there's nothing I can do about it. You know, like
Oh.
someone might say, I'm a Taurus, I'm angry, and that's me, I'm the bull. And now we know that that's not the case. It's showing you, your characteristics, but
Right.
you can change that too. You can decide, I don't want to be that. I want to embrace the positive aspects of being a Taurus, for example. I'm a
Yes.
Gemini, but yeah. So yeah, apart from those things, those tools, I guess, I didn't really think much about emotional regulation or think it
Yeah.
was possible um, in a proper way where you can feel something, feel pain, and move through it a little bit before acting. I would act.
Oh, honey,
I would just
listen,
act.
listening to you say this, it reminds me of I back then everything came out as anger. I didn't even know how to
Mm,
identify sad. You know what I mean? Because again,
mm,
a lot of how I was raised, there was no time for like crying or being sad, nothing. So a lot
mm-hmm,
of what was repressed, no matter what I may have actually been feeling, it would only come
mm.
out as anger because that was the only thing almost I was allowed to
Yes.
identify for a very long
Mm-hmm,
time. So it was
mm-hmm,
interesting getting into Reiki and, like you say, daily meditation and starting to even then recognize these different textures of different emotions. It was like, oh my God. Then all of a sudden I'm
mm.
like crying all the time. And, I
Oh,
mean, just, yeah, that in of itself was a interesting thing of getting to know
yeah.
parts of myself I hadn't known.
Mm-hmm,
But you bring up another thing that is so fascinating to me that I think a lot of people coming into this work may not realize. Different practices within the system of Reiki and meditation and these things, they really do play a big part in like this re identification and really
mm,
truly seeing yourself and having the compassion and understanding of the version that you may have identified with up until a point, but then
mm-hmm,
having some conscious choice in who I want to become and who I want to be
mm,
and how I want to be. So
mm,
when you start having these realizations, these understandings of who you were and why,
mm,
how
mm.
hard was it to, not keep responding in the old ways? Even though you had the awareness, how did you apply change?
Yeah, I think for me, it happened through the daily Reiki. It happened organically.
Yeah.
And a lot of it happened from initially, I had the awareness, as you say, and I realized I was hurting people
Mm,
by being angry or being sad or being mean about something, not being compassionate. And I wanted to be different. There was a me that wanted to be truly, deeply kind. I didn't
hmm.
really, I felt I was probably being kind on the outside, but inside I was just kind of like anxious, not very kind person to
Yes.
myself and others sometimes. And so, but I just found that when I was doing my daily Reiki and repeating the principles, that something would happen in my day-to-day life,
Yeah.
and it didn't trigger me like it used to. I
Hmm.
remember my daughter and her dad having an argument. We'd all gone on out for a meal, and I don't know, they triggered each other. He winds her up, and they had an argument. And in order to stop it, I knew I needed to shout.
Mm.
And I couldn't, it didn't actually come out of me. I couldn't find, I was like, oh God, I need to have the anger to shout. And I was like, I'm raising my voice, trying to stop this thing. And it was just like, it was just really strange. And that's happened a few times where I know I need to be a bit more assertive in order to
Yeah.
diffuse something. And I can't find that energy, because I'm always being zen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not always, but yeah. So yeah, it's in the day to day when things come up that you may normally react to, and you react differently, then you realize, you know what, I'm changing. Or even the thought of, as I said, is there another perspective to this? Whether it's my partner or my daughter, and I'll sit with it a bit, and it'll be another perspective. And
Yeah.
normally if my daughter said something, or my old partner, ex-partners would have said something, straight away I would have been into battle, like,
Yeah.
ah! And now what I find myself doing is, and it probably isn't great, I have to learn to sit in it a bit, but I have to walk away because I
Yeah.
feel the emotion so strongly. And I'm also taking on board what they're saying, and I can see their perspective, but I haven't got the space yet to formulate how I'm really feeling about
Right.
it. And so I find myself taking myself away from situations sometimes. And then
Hmm.
I'm, stewing on my own a little bit, and calming myself down a
Hmm.
little bit, and then I'm able to kind of respond, and I'll have all the epiphanies. But in the moment, yeah, I react completely differently to how I used to. I'd
Yeah.
be there. I'd be witty. I'd be quick. I'd be cutting you down. I'd come back with the clapbacks.
Yes. Oh, we were
It would all be
twins.
there. Yeah, we were
Yeah.
twins. The F bombs, the clapbacks, it would all be there. And even if what you realize though is when you do that, Yolanda, you're saying stuff and you're shouting and you're arguing,
Hmm.
but you're not really getting to the truth of how you're feeling.
No,
And you're just
but it
saying
wasn't even
stuff.
about that. It was just about winning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it
Yes.
was about
Yes.
like self-protecting and almost showing you. Like, you should be very careful if you want to come at me. Do you know what I
It's
mean?
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't mess with me. It was
Yes.
very much like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I used to be in conflict, like schoolyard,
Mm-hmm.
schoolyard mentality, I call it.
Yeah.
And now I can't find that that isn't my energy. And that's all for the self Reiki and maybe an intention as well to be different,
Well, I love
you
that
know.
you mentioned how, initially it took you having to walk away and really
Mm,
process, even
mm,
because I think the transformation comes in stages.
mm.
And to your point, like, one person who can push my buttons like no other is my mother. And so when I started having these
Oh.
realizations, and I also
Mm,
wanted to be very different, and it wasn't
mm,
just a desire to be different, something was changing in me. Just like you say, it was like, I just can't respond that way. And
mm,
so initially, when she would call me and she would poke my buttons as she does, my initial change was, okay, mom, I'll talk to you later. Like, I would
mm,
immediately just have to abandon the
mhm,
conversation because I had to
mm,
go through my process, but it was training myself to do something differently. Whereas
mm.
now she will joke and say, when she knows that she's bothering me, she will joke and say, okay, mom, bye. And she'll start laughing. But now I don't have to end it so abruptly. Now I can
Mhm,
like self regulate in the moment and this kind
mm,
of thing. But
mm,
I wanted to ask you about this because you mentioned like you couldn't find the scream.
mm,
And it brought to mind the question of new ways of disrupting. And
mhm,
one of the things that I started to realize is like, okay, love and kindness and compassion can be very disruptive. It can create that interruption and
mhm,
destructive energy. But it took me some time to trust that love and compassion were as strong as the aggression. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So there was this thing
mhm,
for me of, well, is that strong enough? Is that weak? And is
mhm,
it, this kind of thing? So even though you were allowing yourself to show up differently,
mhm.
did you have to sit with yourself to talk through like allowing the consistency of trying to do things differently?
Mm. Yeah, I think every day is that reminder through the Reiki precepts,
Hmm.
but just kind of what you're saying, creating that space allows new ideas or reasons that come up
Yeah.
that are more powerful than if you were to shout a load of
Right.
nonsense. So you'll hit home like that,
Hmm.
with this particular phrase or thing that's come up for you or view or perspective of that situation
Hmm.
that will yeah, immediately portray where you're coming from, but in a way that can be heard because it isn't with the energy of the shouting and
Right.
the forcing and the pushing. So that compassion where you're trying to see their perspective, and you may even start with that, I can see why you da 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 da, which immediately breaks down their defenses.
Yes.
And then you're, and also da 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 da. So you're doing the psychology thing of it, right? This the
Right.
sandwiching and the positive and the negative. So it kind of gives you space to do that. And it's more commanding, I think. It's more powerful because every word you're saying is truth
Yes.
as opposed to just a load of nonsense. Oh, you got a big head, whatever it
Yeah.
might be,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
random name calling that you might be
Yes.
doing. So, yeah, so because it's coming from that more centered space, and even more than that, it may not be about it. I usually go to asking for a win-win,
Mm.
understanding that there's a win-win in all situations.
Yeah.
It's, and it doesn't mean that someone has to lose for you to win and vice versa.
Yeah.
But if you ask for the win-win, i.e. the different perspective, it'll come. You'll see it and you'll be like, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And also you start to understand, and this is a bit of a law of attraction thing as well, that people only show up the way you expect them to.
Mm.
And so when you expect your mum to be on the phone and wind you up, she's probably going to do that.
Yep.
Whereas before you pick up the phone, and we've done this in class in the Reiki one when we've talked about the principles, but if you pick up the phone, just before you pick up the phone, you just set that intention. I'm going to have a great conversation with my mum.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave the call feeling really uplifted. That's all. And then that's what happens.
Yes.
You try it. It's just all energy. But yeah, people are surrounded by that expectation. And your mum is probably different with someone else or other people in your family than she is with you
Yeah.
on the farm. So it just, yeah, so it
Yeah.
just creates space for a new idea to come in. But if you still feel you want to say something and you want to honor that, you can say that from a more powerful place than if you were shouting. Those words will land more solidly
Yeah.
because it's truth.
Well, part
Um,
of what helped me embrace the change of how I was showing up in relationship
mm,
was I realized I was causing harm and I
mm,
didn't want to cause harm. So it was
mm.
even that realization of like, I don't want to hurt anyone. Like, I don't want to,
Yeah.
like, again, who am I being and who do I
Mm-hmm.
want to be? And
Mm-hmm.
why I understand now, looking back, that there was a part of me. I understand why I wanted to harm. I do,
Mm-hmm.
but
Okay.
it's not who I want to be. And I also see
Mm-hmm.
that it's not necessary. And I also see, like, peel back all the layers of all the things. But this
Mm-hmm.
brings me to, the sacredness of relationships, and not just, I mean, this could apply to friendships, again, our parents, our
Mm-hmm.
everyone in our life. But when we have these romantic partnerships, a lot of people view them as these sacred mirrors for us and these very big opportunities to learn, to grow, to
Mm-hmm.
transform. And I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, because now, with what you've gone through with your own self work and
Mm-hmm.
being a person who has had relationships, how do you view them in nature of like what relationships really provide us with, or what they can?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. It is a mirror. It's part of our growth as well in terms of who we're being,
Yeah.
what we're reacting to, what's triggering us, the kindness we're showing or not showing. It's the best place if you're a spiritual person within the relationship to learn how to interrelate, basically,
Hmm.
how to be authentic. I mean, I believe that's the true purpose, really, to be as authentic as you can
Yeah.
on this planet whilst you're on this planet. And the relationship that you're in is a great place to practice that because, as we mentioned before we started chatting, it isn't easy
Yeah.
to kind of find that piece of authenticity that, and not step into or lean into the part of you that wants to people please because all your fears are coming up, or the part of you that wants to run away because you're feeling avoidant and want to end things before they end things, or just all of these things. So being able to practice that authenticity, it's almost like it is like practicing your spirituality in a way. Who
Yeah.
am I being? What do I want from this? What are my needs? How am I asking for my needs? Who am I choosing? Am I choosing the jock, or am I choosing the person who will treat me as I deserve to be treated? So there's so much to unpack in relationships because it isn't just about you, it's the other person as well and how
Yeah.
they're also showing up. So you may have all these wonderful intentions, they can have a completely different idea. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, so that can just spoil the whole game. But it then can be practiced not just in love relationships, but in, as you said, your friendships.
Hmm.
You can practice if you're working on no longer people pleasing, you can practice that with your friendships as well. Making a choice when they say, "Oh, where do you want to go? Do you want to go? Do you want to have this today? Do you want to have Thai food today? Do you want to have Indian food today? Oh, I don't mind." That's an opportunity to
Yeah.
practice choosing and say, "Oh, let's have Indian." Just making a choice. So all relationships give you that opportunity. But definitely love relationships because the impact of when it goes wrong can really kind of hit us up at our core,
Yeah.
and it can be really painful. So, yeah, for me, the journey is about authenticity. Are you being true to who you say you want to be?
Well,
Are
I
you
have to
practicing that?
say, I mean, one of the big things, I have to write down authenticity because you've said that quite a few times, and I think there's a very powerful part to this. But you
Mhm.
bring up this big, I want to say, challenge in relationships around,
Mm,
first of all, even knowing what our expectations are. Because I think
mm,
sometimes people have like unconscious expectations that they're projecting,
mm,
and then we get mad when the other person isn't meeting whatever those expectations are. And not
Mm.
only do they not know what they are, we may not even clearly know what they
Yeah.
are, right? So there's this
Hmm.
layer of expectation that really needs to be witnessed. But then to your point, also being able to have conversations about what our needs are and what our wants may be.
Hmm.
So I want to ask you about that. But then there's also that little tricky element of, is what we want what we need?
Hmm. Usually not.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, those things, those questions as well, talking about one, as you say, before when we have our time by ourselves,
Yeah.
that is the time to be looking at what we really need as opposed to what we want and
Yeah.
what society says we should have
Yeah.
and what we want to portray to our friends and on Instagram. What do I really need?
Yeah.
What do I really need from a relationship? What am I looking for? And it may be companionship, it may be friendship, it may be someone to travel with, it may be deep conversations, it may be, I don't know, someone to go cycling with. It could, because you have your friends that may fulfill some of those roles,
Right.
yeah. So we don't have to put everything on that person
Right.
and have them be our everything. So really looking at, what do you need? Someone to sit in the silent times with, someone to ground us if we're into our spirituality, maybe. But it's for you to decide what you really need from the relationship. Um, and then you're going from there in terms of your choosing from there. But that then needs to be communicated to the other person. And so particularly when I'm coaching my clients in general, or doing life coaching, we have a little bit around our values. We work out what
Mhm.
their goals are, self-talk, we do all of that, but we go through their values. And that conversation is very powerful to have with your partner, where you have a list of values, and you choose your top 10 and they choose their top 10. And
Mhm.
then you talk about why they've chosen them. Not because they should match, but just so you then get an idea of where they're coming from and where you're coming from.
Right.
So knowing those things as well as their needs in a relationship. So it's a two-way thing. And often when we start talking about relationships, we list all the things that we want that person to give us. They need to make me laugh, they need to do this, they need to take me here, they need to, da, da, and we forget it's a two-way thing. They're also seeking, you're seeking, and they're also seeking.
Yeah.
And that's usually where there can be a problem there, where we expect this person to fulfill all of our needs,
Right.
all of our expectations. And that's a heavy burden for anybody,
Oh,
to
yes.
say, you're responsible for making me happy, you
Right.
know. Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
a lot there. Mm.
So then that kind of brings around the importance of foundationally the relationship we have with ourselves, which
Mm.
we'll touch in a second. But again, you said so many things. The understanding who not just we are, but who our partners may be versus trying to change someone to fit the mold of what you want them to be. I think that creates
Mhm.
a lot of contention in relationship too. And one of
Yeah.
the things that I always think of is turning it back on myself, right? Like
Mhm.
I wouldn't want someone trying to make me to conform to something else. I think all of us want to be understood, right?
Yeah.
Like so we
Yeah.
have this thing of like, yes, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, but a big part of it is we just want to be understood for who
Mm.
we are and our
Mhm.
authenticity. And even if you
Mhm.
don't fully agree with it, you can love me anyway, right? Even if you
Mhm.
don't
Yeah.
fully match, as you say,
Mm.
can you love me anyway, right?
Mm.
So I think that's a really big thing that you bring up this level of understanding. But how much of that did you have to work on, or do you realize now understanding you and your layers and going
Mm.
through this self reflection of why you were the way that you were in the past and, how much work it takes to actually heal? Did that give you more, I want to say grace for
Mm.
people that you may date? Does it give you more of a curiosity about who they really are, what their wounds
Mm.
may be, and does it give a different approach?
Yeah, yeah. Initially, and the healing continues, by the way, it
Right.
still
Yeah.
continues. But initially, when I was in my single season, for many years, I was um, just kind of doing my self-healing, doing my work, and creating a space which was really tranquil and lovely to be in. And I was very much avoiding a relationship, although I wanted it. I was still
Yeah.
scared of it because I thought I'd get hurt, you know? And again, that was me not seeing the other person with that compassion, not understanding that there was someone looking for someone like me, that I had all these things to offer,
Yeah.
as well as me wanting them to bring things to the table. You both want to bring things to the table. Um, so yeah, initially, yeah, in my single phase, I was still very fearful of what I would call in, that I would get it wrong, that I would make the wrong choice again. And I was living in this kind of utopia, this oasis of self where I loved myself, and I did love myself,
Yeah.
but I was still worried, that this niggling thing at the back of my head, that I was going to make the wrong choice. And I literally, it was my daughter that said, "You're avoidant," as I say in the podcast. But that made me just reframe all of that and say, well, look, you know, you have two human beings here who really pretty much want the same thing. Fundamentally, like you said,
Yeah.
everybody wants to be loved, everybody wants to be understood. We take it from there. So just setting an intention for what I decided to do when I started dating was to have deeper conversations, hand in hand with the work I was doing as a coach as well, just having deeper conversations from the beginning so I could and understand that I was also doing the choosing, they were doing the choosing. It wasn't a question of, I hope that person likes me, and we both want to like each other.
Yeah.
So quite quickly moving into some deeper questions that are less superficial. Yes, where do you live, what do you do, da, da, da. But then, what are your visions for your life? What are your values? And just taking the conversation somewhere different um, teaches you a lot about them and allows you to show a lot about yourself as well.
Yeah.
So I started coming from that deeper perspective when I decided I was going to start dating again,
Yeah.
because that's what I want to know. I'm a mature big woman now. I'm not going to talk about too many frivolous things. I'm going to have fun and a laugh, but I also want to know, um, and not put all my eggs in one basket type thing. I want to
Hmm.
know. I want to know what I'm choosing and what I'm refusing and everything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely meant that I was taking a different approach to dating, seeing the other person as also wanting love, wanting to be understood, a human being, um, and it being a we perspective as opposed to I want this, I want that.
Hmm.
I want to be understood, I want to be loved, I want good communication. I put it in a we perspective. So it was
Yeah.
like, we understand each other, we communicate really well. So
Yes.
it was like an energy that I was sort of building.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
completely
love
different approach.
this. Oh, I love this. And just so everyone knows, like I said, she's going to have a podcast focusing on this energy and essence of relationship and all the different facets of it. So, it reminds me of also when I started this work, I was in a relationship and I wanted to end it so that there was something in me that knew I needed space. I
Mhm,
needed space to go through whatever this was going to be. And the truth is, I couldn't have even imagined how much that was true for me because I had a lot. I had a lot
mhm,
that was, I just wanted to isolate a lot at that
mhm,
time because I was being so deeply self reflective. And like I mentioned before, there were all of these layers starting to emerge where now I was starting to get familiar with different layers of emotion. And so,
mhm,
it was just kind of a roller coaster, but it was incredible. But then when I did get back into dating, it was interesting, like how different the texture of what that experience would be. Um, my even attraction had shifted so much of
mhm,
what would have called me for it before really wasn't going to do it for me anymore.
mhm,
And there
mhm,
was this, like you say, there was more of I needed more depth, definitely
mhm,
more depth to feel like there was even any purpose in
mhm,
what was going on or why I was spending time with a person. But I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about the differences because a lot of times people assume that, their soulmate or their perfect person is going to be exactly like them. But, I think we can learn a lot from people who bring something totally different to the table too.
Mm.
What has been your experience with that? Do you, or did you ever think that someone had to like literally mirror you, or have you found any benefit in someone being very different in what they bring?
Yeah, I thought that's a good question. I think for me, I don't think I wanted them to completely mirror me, but more complement me.
Hmm.
So I'm very spiritual, head in the clouds, Gemini. So I knew I needed someone more grounded as well, but someone who could still meet me in conversation.
Hmm.
I was happy if they had their own interests, I had mine, but then we came together on some too, because then I
Yes.
can learn something, they can learn something. So yeah, obviously I wanted the basics. You want someone to be kind, you want someone to be loving, generous, and all these different things. But yeah, I guess with the we perspective, it was a bit of a blending in terms of character traits.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I don't think I sort of thought about it as they have to be completely like me. I don't know
Hmm.
if I want that
No.
because I think, yeah, I don't think I'd want them to be completely like me.
Oh, no, I don't. But I ask you because in this realm, I've noticed a lot of people, especially when we start doing our practices or whatever, a lot of people start to feel like, I need to be with someone else who's into this. I need to be with
Yeah.
someone else who's on their spiritual path,
Mhm.
and not realizing sometimes that everyone's really on a spiritual path. It's just how we're
Mm.
going about it is very different from each other. But
Yeah.
let's say, like, you may start doing Reiki and then all of a sudden you think, like, oh, I need to be with someone who else is into energy healing and meditation and da 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 da. And, just curious from that lens, like, what do you think? What are you really looking for? And does it really have to be that this person practices that too? The shifts that happen within us, and then the frustration that may happen or that a lot of us experience in this realm, that I'm changing, but my partner's not. And that
Mm,
brings up a lot of questions for people in this realm.
mm,
Did
mm.
you encounter any of that, or have you seen that
I
with
think that
clients?
happened with my husband
Mm,
because I was becoming more spiritual with the law of attraction and things like that, and he was staying the same, wasn't contemplating these things. Um, but I do think, yeah, I didn't necessarily want someone who was in a spiritual practice, but I wanted someone who was open to spirituality
yes.
so that they wouldn't stop me doing what I wanted to do.
Yes.
So I know I need that grounding. So they don't have to necessarily be spiritual. It's nice if they're meditating, but it wasn't
Yeah.
essential if they weren't on a spiritual path necessarily.
Yeah.
So long as they were interested in it and would listen to me if I talked about it,
Right.
supported me in it, didn't stop me, and they had a good heart and they were a good person and maybe working on themselves in some way, that's kind of what I was reaching for.
Yeah.
I know sometimes you can have two spiritual people come together and two woo-woo people, nothing gets done, nothing nothing kind of happens.
Yeah.
So this is what I've seen sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of wanted someone who's a bit more grounded. But that's kind of changing a little bit now. I kind of wouldn't mind someone who was a bit more spiritual to kind of travel to these places too. And, my partner at the moment is open to that. But yeah, I can see the attraction of wanting someone who is spiritual so you can pray together, meditate together. You can go to certain retreats together and both enjoy that and both
Yeah.
kind of get it. But so long as that person's open to that, for me, that was fine. That was
So, yeah,
fine. That
that's
was
how I
enough.
feel too. I like the
Mm,
idea of someone being open
yeah.
enough that I can talk to you about things and you're not judging me and thinking like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, she's so weird. I mean, they could think that, but
Mm,
I I like the idea of someone's, yeah, their openness, but I don't think I would want to necessarily be with, because then that would mean I didn't ever step out of these conversations. Do you know, and
Yes.
sometimes it's nice to step out of these conversations
Yeah.
and have
Yeah.
just the different texture of experience, kind of what you
Mm,
shared with us when we were talking about Japan, where you thought it was going to be all just spiritual, all just, ooh, and then your friend came along and said, hey, we're going to the Ninja Cafe, we're going to ride buggies, right? So I think it is nice to
mm,
have that texture and that layer of someone else bringing in other points
yeah.
of focus and other things that you can kind of sink your teeth into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that would really pan out for me. So,
Yeah. Everybody's different. Some people want that and have that
yeah,
and love
yeah, yeah,
that. And it's great. And some are more, and I kind of needed the opposite. I need someone to
yeah,
ground me. I've got the spiritual side.
yes,
I just need someone to maybe talk about things with, but then I've also got my tribe, I've got my community I can
yes,
talk to. But as long as they're not stopping me, I
right,
mean, my partner at the moment, he's open to me giving him Reiki. I got carte
yeah,
blanche, so I know I can give him Reiki.
yeah,
We don't live together, so I can sit up in the morning, give him Reiki to my pillow, and I'm sending it to him. So
yes,
that's nice. If he was like, oh, that woo-woo stuff, I
yeah,
think that would hurt me a little bit.
yeah,
I wouldn't feel seen because that's a very big part of who I am.
right,
So I wouldn't want anyone putting that down or making me feel less than because I'm into this. We get
yes,
enough of that out there without having it in your relationship.
right,
So for me, from that perspective, just being open to it is good, is enough and not stopping me. So
yeah. So, how do you recommend, or do you have any thoughts around? Because again, it is very common that, especially people who are already in relationship, when they get into this
mm,
work, again,
mm,
they start noticing changes within themselves, and then they may
mm,
look and judge their partner for not
mm,
transforming in the ways that they are, right? But there's
yeah.
always that thing of like, well, we chose this work. They didn't
Mm,
necessarily choose to, and nor do they have to, right?
mm,
How do you think, like maybe some ways we can navigate that where you are going through your own like phases and stages of self-realization, but not projecting that onto the partner as if
mm.
they have to mirror that with you.
It's really difficult, isn't it? Because the person is always there.
Yeah,
Um, so, I mean, if they don't stop you from doing anything, then you can go and do all the things you want to do.
right.
But the problem comes when, like I said, if they stop you, or they're really argumentative, or there's just something that makes you feel less than in that dynamic, then
Hmm.
that's going to really make you question everything. If they're, and I have a lot of students who go home and they practice on their partners don't believe in Reiki at all. And
Yeah,
they're like, yeah, go on then, just to please them, and they're not expecting anything.
right.
And sometimes they can be their biggest champions and converts, and oh, I felt this. But they're not spiritual. They're
Yeah.
very left brain, they're into whatever it is they're into. So that shouldn't cause, I don't think, too much of a conflict. But it depends as you grow as a person and where that takes you. It
Hmm.
might be that you're doing your spiritual practice and you want to go and live in another country now. You want to maybe go and travel somewhere. You want to maybe give up your job and do something completely different to what you're doing at the moment. So all of these things can affect your partner and how you see them, how they see you. Some partners are really lovely and give you space to play and give up work and set up your little therapy
Yeah,
room and do something, and they support that.
right.
So I believe if your foundation of your love is really, really strong and it had that depth in the first place, whether they're spiritual or not, I think it will be fine. It will
Yeah,
survive. But if there are already cracks there, then your spiritual journey may open those cracks a little bit wider if you're not meant to be there or something needs to shift in that space. Um, so yeah, although you can set the intention to see them differently, be differently, that may work, it may not. But the lesson or the path for you may not be in that relationship.
right.
Who knows? But only you can decide that and see where it's taking you.
Yeah,
But if you go in with that compassion, seeing them differently, and as long as I said, the key thing is if they're not stopping you, they're supportive of what you're doing, then that should be fine. But that's for me. But
yeah,
somebody else might have a different requirement, a different need, a stronger need to have more support from their partner because they want to come home and talk to them about it, and maybe they're
right.
they're, they're shutting down. So yeah, it's a
But
difficult one to navigate that.
It really is. And I think,
Mm,
one of the things I've noticed too that I've seen people go through is some people will want to tap out. They're just like, this person
mm,
isn't on the same path as me, and so I'm done.
mm,
But I have
mm,
seen oftentimes people who stay in their relationship, they use it again,
mm,
kind of like as this mirror of even,
mm,
let's say, applying some of the principles, the Reiki
mhm,
principles, to how they are being in relationship, or really acknowledging, okay, I might be judging this person for not being whatever you think you are, right?
yeah.
And so that brings up again a lot of opportunity to self reflect on what is
Mm,
it that I'm projecting? What are my expectations? Am I being fair? Am I allowing
mm,
this person to also be in their own autonomy? Like, what is happening?
mm,
And
mm.
that's one of the things I love so much about this work because, like you, I'm also an air sign. We like to think, right? But I love so much about this work how much it can trigger us to really deconstruct and get
Mm,
to the root of why. Why am I
mhm,
feeling this way? Why am I thinking this way? And not
mm,
just within myself, but also the potential of what is that other person going through and what may be their why and what their
mhm,
interests are, their behaviors are. And
mm.
yeah, there's just so much that changes. But I think one of the biggest was, or still is the relationship we end up cultivating with ourselves.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
relationships are just like a beautiful companion to that.
Mhm,
So, one of the
mhm.
things I wanted to circle back to, you did mention a little bit about your single season. And the reason I
Yeah.
want to come back to this is because today, everyone, you can go to
Mm,
Awakening Airwaves and hear Gwen's first episode about our single season. And so, could you
mhm.
tell us a little bit about the significance of this time for us and what it is we can expect on your first episode?
Yes, I will do. Yeah. So the first episode is called Finding Yourself in Your Single Season. And it is about that kind of, if you're looking for a relationship, it's about that gap, which we tend to want to just move through really quickly. We don't tend to see it as a place we can just sit and be and enjoy being there. We there's a lot of stigma sometimes attached to being single.
Yeah,
There was back in my day anyway, and we don't embrace that time. We're just quickly kind of seeking the next relationship.
yeah,
And really what we need is to sit and do a bit of healing, do a bit of reflection, and ask those powerful questions. What do I want? What does that look like for me? But if I didn't have a relationship or needed a relationship, what would I be doing now?
yeah,
And starting to explore that side of things a little bit. So yeah, we don't want to rush that period. It also makes you reflect back on your previous relationships so you can start to connect the dots. And usually we see we're improving with
yes,
each relationship. Hopefully we're growing, that growth is there.
yeah,
And, just reframing that time to a time to, as I said, embrace, bring in some self-love, self-compassion, understand you more. So you know who you're being when that relationship does come in.
yeah,
And sometimes that single season is just a stopgap because the person isn't ready yet. They might still be in a relationship,
yeah,
or they might be just coming out of one and needing a year or two to kind of do their healing. And then they'll be ready for you to meet them,
mhm,
particularly if we're asking for our soulmate. Or our life partner. We're not just saying, if we turn around and said, yeah, I just want to date and just meet someone, we'd
yeah,
probably meet someone much sooner. But we're starting to get really clear on what we want and just what that looks like, just all of that really in that space, in that time. So it's precious, and it's time to value. You rediscover who you are, you start falling in love with you again, you start getting comfortable with your own time and your own company, as opposed to having a fear of not, a fear of being alone, which a lot of people have when they're going
mhm,
through this period. And so it's also a time to think about what you like doing and exploring those interests. So we'll be talking about that as well on the podcast. So it's rich with growth,
yes,
is a way to put it. um, But yeah, we just normally look at relationships out there and look at what we see in social media, and we feel less than, we feel incomplete. And that energy isn't the energy to be attracting from.
All
So
right.
this is a time to clean up our energy around relationships, which, as you said, starts with self, our connection to ourself, our energy, and how we relate to ourselves is primarily important, because what we're looking for, as I said, is also looking for us.
Ooh,
So yeah, yeah.
I love that, Gwen. It's funny you say, I mean, it's really one of the things I think that has helped me that I've been so deeply appreciative of in this work is that
Mm,
re-knowing of myself and
mm,
understanding not just what I was like before and what I was
mhm,
functioning from before and the why and having some healing around all of that, but also really owning who I say I want to be now and holding myself
mhm,
accountable to the different actions and practices that support whatever that may look like. But
mhm,
ultimately, what I found is in this strengthening a relationship with myself, which is ongoing, it has helped with the nature of all of the other relationships in my life, whether romantic,
mhm,
friendship, whatever it may be. It has
mhm,
definitely changed the way that I show up in that because of the changes that have happened
mhm,
in relationship to me being in relationship to myself.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
yeah, so I'm very excited, as you know, for all of the episodes that you're going to release because relationships are a huge part of our life. And so I think
Mhm.
that these are going to be very important and impactful conversations.
Yeah,
And I thank
yeah.
you so much for saying yes to being a contributor and
Oh, it's an
sharing with us.
honor.
Yeah,
Thank you for inviting me. And the other women who are running their podcasts, amazing,
yeah,
amazing women. It's just wonderful to be in that space.
yeah,
You've provided community for me,
yeah.
which is just excellent to be amongst these women, the elders, the sisters. It's just wonderful. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so everyone, you're
That's
going to have to
brilliant.
check out Gwen. Well, in multiple places. You can go to her website, myspiritualbutterfly.com. You can also see what upcoming classes and events she has cooking over on our website, the reikiclass.com. But definitely go right now, actually, to listen to her first episode on Awakening Airwaves. And you can go deeper with her about our finding ourselves and finding yourself in your single season
Mhm.
and just the ideas that come from that. I'm thinking even people who are in relationship can learn
Mhm.
a lot from this kind of
Mhm.
conversation, even if you're not
Mhm.
technically single, but still
Mhm.
all that you provide can help us understand how to take space, even in
Mhm.
relationship, to be
Yes.
very self-reflective and continue working on ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. To treasure that time on their own
Yeah.
rather than fearing that and give it as I said, just give it a new purpose,
Yeah.
and seeking time on their own, time in nature, away days in an Airbnb somewhere just to discover you and who you are.
Oh,
You come back stronger in that relationship, I think, when you do something like that.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. I'm gonna book
Mm.
one today. No, um,
Yeah.
no, but I do. I think about
Mm.
that a lot. I love
Mm.
solitude. So
Mm.
anything that has to do with like just have a reason to go be by myself, secluded somewhere, I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, that sounds
yeah.
incredible. But I
It's
thank you
great.
so much, Gwen, and it has been wonderful journeying with you with what everyone else is experiencing as this week. But
Hmm.
for me, it has been 3 hours, and I thank you so, so much. And I know we have so much more to do.
Yes, you do. Thank you so much, Yolanda. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Always so easy, and it just flows, and it's just channeled, I think.
Yeah.
Our minds align in a really powerful way. And I've learned a lot about you today as
Yeah.
well. So, but yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, my love. And we will see you all very soon. Go down in the show description for all the ways to connect with Gwen. And bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, beautiful alchemist. I just want to say Thank you so much again to Gwen Allison of My Spiritual Butterfly for joining us this week on Reiki Radio. I also want to remind you, if you want to go more into this conversation about spirituality and relationships, you can listen to her new podcast right now on Awakening Airwaves. So wherever you're listening to Reiki Radio, go and look up Awakening Airwaves, subscribe, follow, check out the YouTube channel. We really appreciate the support, and we are trying to further build community, is really what this is about. So I thank you all for being here and being part of the Reiki Radio community, of course. And I really appreciate the 5-star reviews that you have left and also the comments that you've left for the podcast. I do read all of them, and I just appreciate you being here and tuning in. I started this because it was something I would have loved to have access to when I first started my journey. So it is an honor for me to be able to be a part of the community in this way and to be able to share with you all. And hopefully, again, it is supporting your path. So, with that said, that's also why I started the ReikiClass.com and Awakening Airwaves, just to give more reach and make our community bigger and give you more options to learn from more teachers, more practitioners. The ReikiClass.com has free resources. There is so much information there for you. And you, of course, want to check out the upcoming events. Also, today is the summer solstice here in the Northern Hemisphere. And if you would like to join me later today for a free event, be sure that you are subscribed to my newsletter. Go to theenergeticalchemist.com. I will be sending out the link to join me for that free event. And I would love to see you, meet you, chat with you, and have this very intentional journey with you all. So you are welcome to join me there. Other things I want to let you know, because time is going so quickly. Next month, or no, in 2 months, in August, Oracle School begins. So if you have been curious about how to read Oracle cards, get more in tune with your intuition, and also perhaps incorporate it in sessions, you should register and join me for Oracle School. Again, that starts in August, and it features and we'll be working with the Energetic Alchemist Oracle deck. You can learn more on my website about that. Also, if you just want to go deeper into intuitive exploration, I am going to teach Intuitive Mastery live in November of this year. Because members of the Alchemy Circle always have access to the classes that I teach throughout the year, and this is going to be so close to the new year, if you register for the Alchemy Circle now, you will have free access to Intuitive Mastery, which begins in November. So that may also be something you want to look into if you want to join me for a year of mentoring and energy work. Join the Alchemy Circle. And that starts in 2026. But again, you'll get access to Intuitive Mastery, which starts in November. So that is all, my loves. So much going on. I hope you enjoy all of this content. And I really do hope, again, it supports you on your path. Thank you again to Gwen. All of the ways to connect with her are down in the show description. I will see you very soon. And remember to always journey in love.